Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. It's your boy, Mr. Papatoi Dusra, the South Auckland Dusra, the Papatoi Panther. That's what we're here for. Another episode of the Niche Cast with the Wobbly Wildcard. And today we're going to be talking a lot about rugby league, the NRL, the Niche Cage Derby. You got the Warriors versus the Dragons and a bunch of other storyline type of stuff that we want to get into. We'll run through a quick Kiwi Sports Buffet, just a bit of housekeeping, looking after the whare of Kiwi Sports at the start. And of course, early in the week, we record the Variety Show, which is a recap of all the sporting goodness fresh off the weekend from Aotearoa. We record a warm-up kōrero for our patrons as well. So if you're a patron listening to this, check that out. And the best way to support us is on Patreon, straight up the guts. Every Monday and Friday, we deliver an email as well, which has a bunch of weird Kiwi sports notes in it as well. Like I'm thinking I might, for tomorrow's email, Wobbly Wildcard, I might dip into Auckland Rugby League and Auckland Rugby team lists and just like little notes on who the players are. You do your Premiership Team of the Week. There's no more Premiership footy, so what has replaced Premiership Football Team of the Week for you in the email?
Well, in the short term, I've been doing a sort of I call it the album per annum project. I came up with this just randomly scrolling through Twitter at one point, seeing someone arguing about how like there was a Pearl Jam album from 1996 was supposedly the best album that band ever did and the best album anyone did in 1996, and I was like, well, that's not true. And then I thought, I wonder what I would say is the best album from 1996. And then I spun that out to see, like, if I could pick my favorite album from every year, going back as far as I could. And I spent an evening last week going through for the old master list, and I got through to about, I think I got to 1955 was as far as I went back. And so I'm doing a decade every email at the moment. I did the 50s first, did the 60s on Monday, I'll do the 10 albums from the 70s on Friday, and so on and so forth up until right now, I suppose.
What are some of the highlights? What are some of the big dogs? A little teaser.
Oh, I don't know. Well, coming up for the 7th, the funky thing about it was like some years were actually hard. Like there's a lot of good albums from most year. I listened to heaps of music from variety of, genres and sources and whatnot. So I can get through the quantities, but not every year necessarily had the qualities. 1971 was an absolute belter. Like that was one of the hardest ones to pick. I think I went with Led Zeppelin's 4th record for that for sentimental reasons as much as anything. It was one of my first gateway albums as well. Where it got really weird was like, first of all, the 80s I thought would suck, but the 80s seems to be like overall pretty average, but like there was one amazing album most years, like at least. So when you're only picking one album per year, it's not so bad. And where it got really weird was where I got up to the point of like, since the website started and since I've been writing about music and stuff I've actually like reviewed or written about and say album jukeboxes and doing my like top 10 albums of the year, and then I have to pick one of those 10. It's hard enough to get to 10 when you listen to a lot of new stuff. So the most recent, like the 2010s, were probably the hardest ones to actually come up with something for. But I got there, and people will see in a week or two what I got up to with those.
I am going to hijack the splash of mindfulness at the start of the show because I was listening to something about Persia, the history of the Persian Empire, and I have a quote. This is just from a Google, like they were talking about the Persian tolerance, and I just Googled up some quotes to help lay that out in this splash of mindfulness. I had to come strong because I'm hijacking it, so I'm just coming out swinging. And it says, Cyrus's policy of remarkable tolerance based on a respect for individual people, ethnic groups, other religions, and ancient kingdoms was revolutionary for peoples accustomed to the ruthless governing styles of Neo-Assyrian and Neo-Babylonian empires. Buyakasha, tolerance.
Yeah, you're definitely coming in hard there with the... Would you say the Persian Empire? This is a
Cyrus the Persian, yep.
All right. Yeah, sweet. Well, I had an absolute belter too, so I guess I'll save that one for Monday, because it's not just a quote, but like one of those like one paragraph little story things as well. It was a good one. I'm excited to chuck that one out next time. But in the meantime, tolerance, yeah, always a very valuable and often ignored in the an often ignored value in the society that we live in, which not just prefers but like hammers home ideas about individualism and you versus the world, and gotta, like, you can't just win, you have to dominate everybody else, and like you don't win unless other people lose, those kind of things. It tends to create othering when it comes to people who are different to you, and that eats into the concept of tolerance, which is always an important one to throw back. So I do like that.
We will do a bit of housekeeping now. We have Will Young, Black Caps batsman. He has been named in the Durham squad to face Essex. Will Young's the only Kiwi cricketer on the county tour, the Kiwi County Tour this year. Who's in his team? Basically, no one people know other than Scott Borthwick, who spent some time, I think, playing for Wellington a couple seasons ago. He's the captain of Durham. That's where Will Young is playing. And James Franklin is the coach of Durham. So shout out to him. They are facing Essex. Essex have, just Alistair Cook, Stephen Harmer, who has basically been the best spinner in England for a couple seasons, maybe 5 seasons. He doesn't play for England because he's a South African overseas player. And that's part of the, maybe that's the reason there's only one Kiwi playing county cricket, is because of all the Brexit stuff. Maybe that's an impactor. I don't know. Matt Quinn. There you go. I've just spotted Matt Quinn in the Essex squad, so it'll be interesting to see if he plays. He's an Auckland Aces seamer off and on, from Auckland, who has moved. He's got a British passport. He's playing for Essex. Didn't play the first game, but he's in the squad, so you might have Matt Quinn bowling to Will Young in the county tour. IPL. Trent Bolt's been pretty good. Couple wickets for Trent Bolt. 3 wickets and an average of 21. Strike rate of 16. And Kyle Jamieson has also played both games for the Royal Challengers Bangalore. He's took 2 wickets, average of 28, strike rate of 21. There's also an absence of Kane Williamson, which little bit of research on the old Twitter. Sunrisers Hyderabad fans aren't too happy with Kane Williamson not playing. They believe he's being dropped. I probably just think he's just chilling, and they'll bring him back at some time to bat with Davey Warner. Then we have a bit of Kiwi-MMA, and this is a earth-shattering moment. We are moving from Kiwi UFC to Kiwi-MMA. It's official, because this weekend we have a dude by the name of JJ Wilson. He's fighting on a Bellator card against Pedro Carvalho. JJ Wilson is a featherweight, 7-0 in MMA, and he's fighting on Bellator, so that's one of the other major organizations. And then there's another organization called the Professional Fighters League, which is more of a tournament style, and Gina Fabian is fighting on that. She is from Auckland, and that Gina Fabian fights on May 6th, and we have JJ Wilson fighting Saturday morning-ish New Zealand time. So we basically have a MMA fighter from New Zealand in each of the 3 major fighting competitions in the world, which is pretty epic. So, wildcard. Any housekeeping for yourself?
Yeah, certainly. I'm a little bit off the Flying Kiwis desk. There's not always midweek Flying Kiwis news, but there is this week. Noah Billingsley joining Phoenix Rising on loan, which so he was out. Since being drafted by Minnesota United in the MLS, he went out on loan to Las Vegas Lights for the USL season, which was pretty truncated because of obvious COVID related happenings, and Didn't maybe get the biggest impression he would have liked there just because he wasn't able to play a heap of games there. Went back at the end of that season and there was still a little bit of MLS left. He made his debut for Minnesota off the bench there. He's going back out on loan to the USL once more, which will be an opportunity for him to play a heap of games, to really bomb forward from right back and continue to learn his craft, and hopefully go back next year and have a crack at, or maybe even at the end of this year again, have a crack at trying to break into that Minnesota United sort of match day squad group of players. They are pretty well stocked for fullbacks at the moment, so this is the better move for him, is to go and get football elsewhere, especially where he's going to play a lot in a position because he's only a relatively recent convert to the right back role, so always want to get them reps in. The cool thing about Phoenix Rising is that this is they're a little bit of a safe harbor for New Zealanders who either didn't quite or haven't yet made it in their MLS at the moment. There was a whole heap of guys signed for the MLS contracts last season. Not everybody did the best there. Declan Wynn is a good example. He didn't play a single minute for Colorado, or he got released at the end of that season. He signed with Phoenix Rising, as has James Musa, who was a teammate of Billingsley's for Minnesota United. So he made a few appearances off the bench there, 6 or 7 games for them last season, but didn't get re-signed at the end of it. So there's actually 3 New Zealanders. Musa's likely to play centre back rather than centre mid for Phoenix, which mean you could get match days where 3 of their back 4 are all from New Zealand, which is kind of crazy, especially because there's actually only 2 other New Zealanders involved in the USL altogether. The USL starts in 2 weeks, the MLS starts this week. The other 2 are Max Mata and Kyle Adams, Kyle Adams is another one. He was signed with Houston and then didn't get any minutes, didn't make any match day teams, ended up back on loan, I believe, in the USL anyway. They're both signed with Real Monarchs. So those are the only 5 New Zealanders in the USL. You got guys like Hunter Ashworth, who's a former under-20s international for New Zealand. He got released by Pittsburgh, I think it was. You had Oscar Ramsey was playing a little bit for one of the teams. He is currently playing for Western Springs or something like that, or Northern Rovers, one of those teams in the Northern League in New Zealand. So 1 or 2 others as well. Sam Brotherton is playing domestically. I think he's still at Auckland City. He was for the end of the Premiership season anyway. His team... He was playing for North Carolina, and they voluntarily chose to be relegated. There's no actual promotion relegation in America, but they decided they wanted to drop down a division to just be able to play younger players and be a development club and whatnot. And so obviously Brotherton was yeah, nah. Came back to New Zealand at that point. So there's you've also got obviously Tommy Smith and Winston Reid from the MLS crew who have gone back to England playing relatively well. Tommy Smith is playing every week for Colchester in League 2. Winston Reid is in and out for Brentford, who are trying to get promoted from the Championship. So the Kiwi fellas in the MLS, the stocks are dropped a little bit, but it's maybe a more stable situation we find ourselves in, where everyone who's over there should hopefully be playing pretty regularly. The 3 guys you got at MLS level right now, since Billingsley's gone out on loan, you got Michael Boxall at Minnesota, you got Bill Tuiloma at Portland, and you've got Elliot Collier at Chicago. I don't think I'm missing anyone there. So interesting times when that league will kick off on the weekend. You've already had the start of the Challenge Cup, which isn't the NWSL, the Women's League. It's not the actual Women's League. It's like a preseason tournament that they're doing. It counts as cup appearances rather than NWSL appearances. And there are 4 Kiwi ladies in the NWSL this season, which is good. It's the tied most we've ever had, getting back to those 2018, 2017 years. It's mostly the same people as well. Abby Erceg at North Carolina, Katie Bowen for they were Utah, but they moved back to Kansas City. Rosie White at OL Reign, and the newbie is Ellie Riley at Orlando Pride, and she was the only one who played in the first round. Rosie White had a bye, Abby Erceg had a back injury, Katie Bowen was an unused sub. Ellie Riley is going to be a pretty key player by the looks of it for Orlando Pride, although the most notable thing that she did in her club debut was get absolutely munted in the knee by a high stomping boot, and somehow the player who caught her only got a yellow card for that, although she did later get a subsequent suspension. So, and Ellie Riley tweeted a picture of her knee looking all cut up, being like, "Can you believe the ref told me that it was only a yellow because it was just a stomp on the foot or something like she clearly got scraped down the knee. It was a horrible tackle. Should definitely have been a red, but aside from that, like there wasn't a lot of bombing forward and whipping crosses into the box, but there was a lot. I think Ellie Riley made more attempted passes than any other player in her team, so there's a lot of work in the build-up for her. She does look like she'll be a pretty key player at left back there for them, so interesting times with the Flying Kiwis USA branch getting back underway this month. Some of that's already started, some of that's about to start, some of that will start in a week or two, but back on that American buzz, and that's what we've got.
Lydia Ko's also just started her first round at the Lotte Championship, which is in Hawaii, so not bad. Not bad to be playing a bit of golf in Hawaii. She's played 3 holes. She birdied the first 2, so decent start for Lydia Ko. Cool. Wildcard, Dragons versus Warriors. I kind of like this vibe I'm getting for this game because I don't have to think too hard about how it's going to be won and what are key things in this game for either team. Because the Dragons have been very good this season just based on effort and attitude and intensity. I think I saw before they've basically had 2 tough away wins. They were away to Newcastle, which was good to see because I am following, I do hate watch the Knights a bit, and then Blake Green's come in and had 2 mediocre performances, so it is kind of fun to see. Away to Newcastle, the Dragons won 22-13. Then away to Parramatta Eels, the Dragons won 26-12. Both games built on intensity, attitude, desire, those sorts of things, which comes and goes for the Warriors. And so the only way the Warriors are going to win this game is if they rise to that level of energy for the contest, like the physicality. Like, you can get really complex in a lot of different sports, but some sports, rugby league is one of them, it gets real simple as well. And like if you just run harder, tackle harder, focus longer, and have a better attitude, you're going to win. Which is the case. I reckon it's the case for a lot of sports, but something the Dragons have been doing really well, something the Warriors maybe haven't done so well. That's how the game's going to be won and lost, and it should be fun. Is that kind of how you've seen, because you're a Dragons fan, is that how you've seen the Dragons perform this season?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely been the backbone of it all, and you don't get to do the flashy, Matt Duffy making support runs on the inside, little pop pass and through the hole sort of thing. You don't get to do that kind of stuff unless you're creating that hole in the first place by getting defenders on the back foot and winning the rucks and getting quick play the balls and that kind of stuff. Like, that's all very, that's the foundation. And the Dragons have, I think, to be fair to the Dragons, even when they've been terrible, they've usually had that. I remember long stretches of very mediocre play last season tended to come about because of just dumb errors and stuff. Like, they've generally been a team that can defend their own line pretty well and do things well enough organized. They've just often been too organized and had nothing else on top of that. They've got a nice mix at the moment. Ben Hunt is injured for the foreseeable future, but Corey Norman's in some decent form as well. I quite like Adam Clune as a halfback anyway. Guys like, Zach Lomax is in good form. He's coming through nicely. It's enough there. Like, Michaeli Revalau's playing really well as well. He's a guy a little bit, I won't say critical, so it makes me sound like I'm picking on him, but he's been an error-prone player in the past. He's playing at a high level at the moment and, scoring a lot of tough tries and what. These kind of things taking the... Plus, I guess just having a new coach and all that, it gives you a lease of life. It hits the refresh button. It shakes out a few cobwebs, and I think they're just playing quite smart, tactical, obviously the attitude's been great, and it's relatively well suited to the style of what the game is becoming with, the much talked about new rules and interpretations and that. So they've been super impressive for a team. I came into the season thinking we're looking at a wooden spoon or something like this. I wasn't too sure. I wasn't too confident coming in, and then all of a sudden, I guess it just shows the differences between dead average and bloody good sometimes aren't as far apart as you think they might be. A week can make a big difference, and a couple wins in a row can make an enormous difference. And I think that's a similar state with the Warriors, though. And I think these two teams, there are a fair few similarities. Like the Warriors maybe don't have that week-to-week consistency, but I think the Warriors' best performances aren't too far off a lot of those things I was just saying about the Dragons. In fact, if anything, they probably have a little bit more of that, like, flair on top of the thing, just maybe not as much of the backbone, I don't know, but it's a game I am confident the Dragons will win just because of the way the Dragons are going, but it's also like, I remember it was relatively early last season, wasn't it, where the Dragons played the Warriors, and the Warriors, they had one of those, was it like they didn't make a mistake until about 5 minutes to go or something? Like they flirted with a perfect completion rate for an entire game, like that kind of thing. And that was exactly what I was saying about that Dragons team, like not able to overcome those kind of things. You just play too solid, and if the game doesn't ever get broken up, you don't ever get opportunities. And then you make a couple mistakes, and the team that doesn't make mistakes will get you. So I think there's some similarities between the state of these two teams. Just maybe the Dragons are a little more consolidated at this point than the Warriors are. But as I say, like week to week, a lot can change in a sport like the NRL. Like famously, a lot can change in a space of a week in the NRL. So I'm not gonna be counting chickens or however that saying goes at this point.
Josh Maguire is on the extended bench as well, so might add it's kind of compounding. You can pick up players mid-season fairly easily in the NRL if the player really wants it to happen and you want it to happen. It can come together quite quickly. So you've got a good team like the Dragons who have started the season strong. Then you add in someone like Josh Maguire who suits the team perfectly. Not only because he's a former Bronco, of which there are quite a few here, but the personality that I've talked about and the identity of the Dragons to start this season is a bit rugged, a bit niggly, tough. Like they're coming hard, and now you add Josh Maguire to that. Seems like a fairly perfect combination. For the Warriors, as far as their team, how their team looks this week, Peter Hiku is starting on the wing. And I wrote about this in the Warriors diary. The Warriors, which I don't want to get too deep into this wildcard because I'm not convinced it's legit, but I am, as you know, I did ponder Roger Tuivasa-Sheck's impact on winning. Just pondered, and with Roger Tuivasa-Sheck and the back two wingers, so you've got Kiwis-MMA, David Fusitu'a. The Warriors aren't very good at kick return meters. So obviously there's a couple different factors there, like a good kicking game, kicking to space, good kick chase and stuff like that, which if you've got Kiwis-MMA steaming it back, your game plan kind of has to be, let's get a good kick chase in there. Otherwise Roger Tuivasa-Sheck's running at a scattered line type of shit. But the Warriors are 11th in kick return meters. And 4 teams have over 1,000. The Warriors have 870. 4 teams have over 1,000, and those 4 teams are in order: Storm, Panthers, Eels, Roosters. So, who else has over 900? Rabbitohs and Dragons. These are the best teams in the NRL, and rugby league's pretty simple. So if you get your set of 6 started strongly, you're going to kind of go a long way to winning the game. The Warriors aren't doing that with Tuivasa-Sheck, Mamalo, and Fusitu'a, which, don't know, doesn't make much sense. But now you've got Peter Hiku. Maybe you've got Peter Hiku who's got a bit of footwork as a winger. That might help. Also, Marcelo Montoya's being given a good crack at centre. Forward pack, Josh Curran starting on an edge, He had a good game for the Redcliffe Dolphins last week. Jack Murchie played 80 minutes last week for the first time this season. And, the two dudes who had 2 errors, especially late in that game against the Seagulls, the Jack Murchie and Kane Evans was playing his first game. Jack Murchie was playing 80 minutes for the first time. So hopefully they can adjust. And then otherwise it's as per. One thing that the Dragons do extremely well, wildcard, is dummy half running. And the Warriors have been a bit susceptible in the middle. Jazz Tavanga had 7 missed tackles last week. Tohu Harris had 3, which for him's pretty amazing. And then all the starting forwards had a missed tackle. And that's against the Seagulls, who weren't exactly like a barnstorming forward pack. Then you've got the Dragons, who are first in dummy half runs. They have 90 dummy half runs from the first 5 games. And in the top 50 for dummy half runs, the Dragons have no player between 30 and 50. And then they have Zach Lomax. He's got 9 dummy half runs, which is 26th in the NRL. So he's just missed that 10 mark, because the Dragons then have Cody Ramsey 11, Matt Duffy 12, Andrew McCulloch 26, Jack Bird 27. So they've got 4 players with at least 10 dummy half runs total for the season, and Zach Lomax is right there with 9. Andrew McCulloch is 5th in dummy half runs, and he averages 5.2 a game, but he's not very fast. So I don't know, he's obviously the game plan is to run out of dummy half, but Andrew McCulloch's extremely effective because he's just behind Brandon Smith and he's just behind Harry Grant and Damien Cook, who averaged 6. Andrew McCulloch averages 5.2. Jack Bird is first in the NRL for dummy half runs, 6.8. So the Dragons are really good dummy half running. The Warriors a bit iffy in terms of middle defense and slowing things down in the middle. Seems like a key factor there, wildcard.
Yeah, and a couple of things there that you said all kind of tie in quite nicely with the way that the Dragons were able to beat the Eels on was it Sunday night? I don't know if you watched that game or not, but and this is also just like seeing these things echoed and stuff I've read about how the Dragons have been going so far this season as well. Like it's the dummy half running is a good example, and I noticed as well, like of the guys you mentioned, there's obviously the McCulloch, starting hooker, and then it was 2 centers and a winger. I don't know what Michaeli Ravalawa was doing, lazy bugger, not getting out there, but he does take a lot of kick returns as well. So maybe he's like tiring himself out earlier on in on the first tackle or something like that. I don't know, but like there's clearly an emphasis there to speed the game up when you're in attack. And everyone's talking about how much the game has been sped up and the effect it has on teams trying to keep up, and the way it's like led to more, just like the disparity between the best teams and the worst teams, and you're getting these blowout wins, and especially like a lot of points scored late on when the weaker teams are tiring and this kind of thing. Like that's all objectively true. Like that stuff, you can see it, and there's statistical evidence, all these things will back it up. There are a lot more big wins in that, but the Dragons are quite interesting in how they do it, because you saw against the Eels, they, first of all, like the muscling up through the middle was a big, like that's kind of, again, the foundation that this is all built on, but they weren't afraid to give away a 6 again or whatever. In fact, I think Tarek Sims got like sin-binned at one point, and repeated infringements and all this. Like they were not, like, even defending on their goal line, if things were a bit busted, they were trying to slow things down, give themselves a chance to defend with a set line, even if it meant giving up 6 more tackles. And then because they were muscling up in the middle, the Eels were shifting the ball quite quickly to try to get out to the wingers, and I lost count of how many times Blake Ferguson just got shoved over the sideline by 4 covering defenders. And from what you said about the way that the Warriors' outside backs have been going, I think that's a pretty interesting area to look at, because they got, Eels are as good as any team in those areas, and they kind of got targeted by the Dragons' game plan. But it's pretty, like, the Dragons managed that lead so well against the Eels because they were able to, I guess when you're in the lead, it makes everything easier because the penalties you give away aren't necessarily, and the repeat sets and the 6 agains, they don't hurt you as much when you're already in the lead. Like, you got a bit of a buffer there, but definitely that was something that they weren't afraid to do. They didn't shy away from. They were trying to speed the game up on attack, slow the game down on defense, and then control things nicely from there. I can't remember the last time I saw a Dragons team look comfortable with the lead. It was nice, man. It was like a close lead as well against a very good team. It was, there was solid stuff, and there's a few areas therefore to keep an eye out, I suppose, on exactly. I mean, you can't speculate, but I'm curious on how those kind of things look against the Warriors, who, as you say, are potentially susceptible in one or two of those areas as well.
So in the NRL, just some wider things at play here. I've come to view the Adam Reynolds situation at the Roosters and what's just happened with John Morris at the Sharks as an interesting moment in terms of loyalty and looking after the people you need to look after at your, in a professional sports sense. Adam Reynolds is the person you want to look after as a club. He's a Rabbitoh through and through. We joked about it before the show, but the Rabbitohs fans kind of put themselves in an awkward position because they made a petition to re-sign Alex Johnson, and that has complicated re-signing Adam Reynolds. So if you're a South fan, it's like, who would you rather have a petition for? Alex Johnson or Adam Reynolds? Of course, they didn't know, but it's just that's the whole point here. It's just an interesting juncture, an interesting paradox we've got. And on part of that, I was listening to Anthony Seibold on Barry Toohey's podcast, and Anthony Seibold now works for the Newcastle Knights, and it's just bounced back. He's basically doing whatever the fuck he wants to do, is how it is. So he works in different fields, and he just lives the best life. So he's bounced back all good after the Broncos shit. But he left the Rabbitohs for more money and more, he basically took the money option, and he was I kind of regret doing that. So that's been something that I've thought about as well, is if you put certain things first, there might be some sort of it might not work out how you want it to work out. And if you are a club like the Rabbitohs and you skimp on someone like Adam Reynolds, there might be some bad juju coming your way. It's harder for me to say that about the Sharks because the coach that I've got in, Craig Fitzgibbon, is a good coach, and that's the thing, is everyone just reverts back to Craig Fitzgibbon's a really good coach, and it's gonna it seems like that has a greater chance of working out all good because Fitzgibbon is a smart coach, blah blah blah. But it's a lot of weird vibes to put out there when you're doing John Morris as they did John Morris. Just some things beneath the surface that are just are talked about, but people might not know. John Morris is the lowest paid head coach. Fitzgibbon was the highest paid assistant coach, and he was getting paid the same amount or maybe a bit more than John Morris. So John Morris came in, caretaker coach, has limited salary cap space because there was a salary cap issue, a penalty, and Bronson Xerri had his steroid shit going on, and John Morris was so he rose through the Sharks. He finished his career at the Sharks, I think, and then he worked in junior coaching, so SG ball coaching. The Sharks set up a massive junior academy with John Morris as one of the lead coaches. So all those young players came up with John Morris as their junior coach, which has an interesting Kiwi angle, which I'll get to in a second. So John Morris rose through the club, got his position, and his moment was an incredibly difficult, it's just a disadvantage advantageous position for a head coach, your first head coaching job, and he just got like given the flick. So something like Jackson Ferris was in the Sharks junior system. There's another dude, Jensen Taumoepiao, who's from Taranaki. He has been on the extended bench for a few games this year in the NRL. He's from the Sharks junior system. Simi Sasangi is there this year as well. He's a very young, robust prop. So and then you've got Sean Johnson. The big story here for me is Sean Johnson with regards to the situation, because he's probably going to leave. Like, he's probably going to go somewhere else. Like, I think he liked John Morris, and I don't know. It's just like Sean Johnson's one of the biggest, New Zealand Rugby League stars, and he's going to be on the move for a different club. So that's just going to be very interesting, considering before he got injured last year, he was leading the NRL in try assists. He was playing really good footy, like natural maturation type of footy that I would like want to see from Sean Johnson. Then he got injured. Even if everything stayed the same, it would have been interesting, because you got Matt Moylan and Chad Townsend both playing well. Will Kennedy's playing well at fullback. So all three of your halves and fullback are playing well. Where do you put Sean Johnson? So it was already going to be interesting. Now the Sharks have done John Morris as they did, and I think the bad juju you might see there is like some of the players are going to be like, yo, fuck this shit, let's go somewhere else. So what do you make of just anything there, Wildcard? Sorry for rambling on a bit.
Well, the main thing I was thinking of there is you're talking about the possibility of Sean Johnson leaving, and I was thinking, I wonder where he would go, like, without knowing anything about various salary cap inflections and all this. I mean, obviously the version of Sean Johnson that there was last season would genuinely fit in pretty nicely on the Warriors right now. I don't think that would necessarily happen though. But the club I was picturing there is like, imagine Sean Johnson again, like the injury is a factor here. Assuming he comes back to being at the same level he was when he got injured. Imagine him on the Roosters. Imagine what a nice fit that would be. That's a tantalizing one to think about. But as to the wider scopes of loyalty in the National Rugby League competition, I mean, there's certain things which seem like obvious sometimes when you talk. And I've been writing about Steven Adams, and I think there's some parallels here about the way like Steven Adams seems to get criticized a lot by New Orleans fans because he was traded for. Because they went out and got him. Therefore, they expect something more than what he is. And his role has changed a little bit. That's something I'll write about in the next Kiwi Steve. Hopefully that'll be up as well by the time anyone hears this podcast anyway. But there's complications with like the team trying to build around Zion, and that's been a moving target in the first place. So then someone like Steven Adams is asked to do different things. And it's just interesting looking at the way he's talked about, because he was always beloved in OKC because they drafted him for nothing. He came up through and, was a part of some very good teams for them, and had a couple of lovely playoff runs as well, which also always boosts the stocks. So there's a very different way in which he's perceived, but he's the same player. Like, if anyone is the same player, it's Steven Adams. He's as sturdy as it gets. Like, he is just going to do the same role, exactly what he's asked to do every time. Like, nothing's changed there, but the perception is so different. I think it's interesting in general the way that rosters are like put together and like that, and the thought that the Rabbitohs would like back down on one thing and put themselves in trouble because the fans demand it. Like, sometimes you just have to. I mean, you have to be transparent with fans. That's the most important thing. But sometimes you have to make difficult decisions, and even then, like what we're talking about before the thing is like, they still, like, Adam Reynolds will still stay if he gets a couple years on his contract. It's not that hard to think. He's only 30. He's not like over the hill. He's still one of the very best kickers in the competition. He's, won a premiership with them, and these kind of things you need to take care of. Like, when it comes to recruiting players, sometimes I think people think that it's just like, if you're an NRL club, or to use the Steven Adams example, if you're an NBA club, you can just get these things done. Like, you can just sign whoever you want. doesn't matter. They'll follow the money. These things work. It's like pressing buttons on Football Manager or whatever, and it's just not necessarily like when you get into the real life. There's personalities involved, and the way you treat your players and the way you treat the coaching staff and important people in your club. Players and agents are aware of this, and they take note of the clubs who don't look after their own, and they don't necessarily look towards those clubs if there's a choice between others. These things do matter, and sometimes more obscure ways than people realize. And it's just interesting to see how when you get these good examples of things being done poorly, and sometimes you end up in the right situation. Like the Dragons are in a nice situation now, but everything was done terribly leading up to this. A little bit of like multiplying negatives and ending up with a positive almost, but things were done. I don't know. The Dragons are a weird scene for a few reasons, because I don't actually think they were that bad beforehand. They were just weirdly inconsistent. But it's easy when you look at the way things are. Like when you look at examples of things being done poorly, it's just I don't know. I just like to sit back and be aware of these things, because it's always more difficult than fans necessarily realize in terms of how these decisions are made. But then also sometimes it's just really obvious dumb things, and it's nice to see other clubs struggling, because there's always a couple in every league you follow. There's always a couple that are just on the downswing. No one's successful all the time, and well, I was going to say the Dragons but I guess the Warriors are probably the one we should focus on. Warriors are sitting relatively pretty, watching chaos go on around them at the same time as well. Like the Warriors are in a bubble in New Zealand in terms of their that's probably the wrong term because of the time we're in, but the media bubble, and you only hear about the Warriors results sort of thing. Like it's in New Zealand, it's the same thing that the Brisbane Broncos have trouble with sometimes as well, especially when they're on a downswing at the moment. Like when you're the dominant club in your marketplace, you just have so much more focus and speculation, and that can lead to a bit of tunnel vision. And one thing you did mention when we were talking before we started recording is the Warriors are in a prettier position than maybe they get credit for. Like when you look at some of the dramas that go on elsewhere, right?
Yeah, and there's something about the Warriors. Like I was just watching the video with Reece Walsh, their new signing, and he was happy to be there. Like if you're a surfer, you'll say he was frothing, like whatever. Like he was stoked, he was fucking loving it. Speaking with the general manager Cameron George, but it's obviously he wanted to be there, he's just signed there. But that's something I see throughout the Warriors is a lot of these players just want to be there, and they're happy to be part of the Warriors. And I think that's it's not coincidental, it's not by accident. I think that's how you see a organization that is solid in who they are, what they do. The loyalty is a weird way to frame it. I think looking on the Reynolds and Morris situation, but I think it's just an interesting case of how clubs treat people in their organization. And to me, it's interesting because, as I said, now I'm eager to see how this situation flips out for either. If Reynolds leaves, what are the Rabbitohs up to? How does it impact Reynolds? It was one of those things when Jason Taumalolo signed that 10-year contract at a decent, $1 million, whatever. And it's okay, let's see how this plays out because it's never been done before. So it's just let's just see what happens and try and learn from it. Like you said, be aware of it. For me, it's just learning from these things, because whether it's Anthony Seabolt, whether it's maybe a bit of Jason Taumalolo now, who's to say he just never quite reached those heights again? Injury or the whole game changed on Jason Taumalolo. So signing a player for 10 years in that environment you'd say it's volatile. So I'm fascinated to see how these things play out, and whether it's a bit of bad juju coming back around, whether it's smart decision making, what's the end thing. You brought up where might Sean Johnson go. The Roosters, I would agree, it would be very roostery for them to have Shaun Johnson. It would be fantastic for Shaun Johnson. I don't think they have any way of getting Shaun Johnson. Sam Walker's looking pretty good. Luke Keary's going to be there as well. And then even your former Dragon, Drew Hutchison, does a pretty good job, like just a stopgap. So I can't see the Roosters. I can see the Warriors return more than the Roosters. The Warriors have opened up a bit of salary cap space. They have certain people involved who might want to reconnect with Shaun Johnson. Shaun Johnson's just had a baby. His wife, Kayla Cullen's from Auckland. He's from Auckland. So that might be a family situation that's better for him. I'm not saying it's likely. I just think it may be one of the possibilities because Shaun, none of this, a week ago, John Morris was the coach, things changed very quickly and Shaun Johnson might just want to get the fuck out of there. Another situation I'm interested in is Michael Maguire coaching the Tigers because he is the coach of the New Zealand Kiwis and the Tigers suck. And I think that could be an option for Shaun Johnson. Is if the Tigers suck and he's worked with Michael Maguire before at the Kiwis level, a move to the Tigers could be an option as well. Those are the kind of the clubs that stand out to me, other than all the shit teams who need a good halfback are in the mix because that's what they require. But Shaun Johnson also doesn't seem like the type of dude who's just going to take big money at a shit club. I think the ultimate thing for him to do would be the Roosters move because it's it sets up your whole career. And that's the level of maturity and growth in Shaun Johnson. I think he's going to pursue that path more than he's going to pursue, oh shit, one of the shit clubs is offering me big money to come in. You see any other situations that might suit Shaun Johnson?
It's tricky because of the salary cap aspect of it, I agree. I think I could see him taking a little less to be on a competitive team. He's sort of at that point of his career. You often get this in sports with someone who maybe hasn't, he played in a grand final in his first year, didn't he? Hasn't really had the opportunity to get back towards those heights since, and he's had a couple big contracts. He had a big extension with the Warriors. He was on good money there. He's been on good money at the Sharks. Don't really see him as being someone who would play, if he's not playing in Auckland, I don't think he'd play outside of New South Wales either. I think he probably quite likes the lifestyle in Sydney and probably suits him fairly well as well, just from what I've heard about Shaun Johnson. So I don't know. There's always options, and it often doesn't take much. You don't often need to get to the flashy PowerPoint presentation to sell someone. If you just get a couple of glowing personalities, tell someone that we believe you can help us win a championship, and we want you to be the guy, and say whisper some nice words in a fella's ears, and you can change someone's mind very quickly. I sort of suspect, if I had to bet, I think the most likely thing is he'd just have to come to terms with playing for the Sharks with a different coach. But I don't know. That's up to what the Sharks are up to. I think maybe the staying where he is the most likely of a few different options.
One, just thinking about the Tigers. So I was about to say, thinking about the Tigers, so the Dragons. The Dragons do have a lot of Broncos. This is from their team list this week. Jack Bird was a Bronco, but no real Anthony Griffin connection. Corey Norman, Bronco, Griffin connection. Andrew McCulloch, Bronco, Griffin connection. And now you're bringing in Josh Maguire, Bronco, Griffin connection.
The biggest one of all as well, Ben Hunt, who's out injured.
Yes, sorry, yeah. And then local juniors is something I'm pondering here, wildcard. Matthew Duffy, local junior. Cody Ramsey, I don't think he's local, but he is a Dragons junior. Like, he came up through the Dragons system, right?
Yeah, he hasn't played for anyone else. Jack Bird is in both of those categories that you mentioned as well. Broncos connection and local junior.
Zach Lomax is Dragons hardcore. Blake Laurie,
Yep. Yeah,
does he come up through the Dragons? Paul Vaughan, no. Josh Kerr is from Queensland, but I think he was signed out of reserve grade from Queensland.
Yeah, I think they got him from, forget where, but I can check that.
I think it was Redcliffe, actually, Redcliffe. Tarek Sims, he is a localish junior, but he didn't come up through the Dragons. Tyrell Fuimaono has been around a bit, finding his groove, finding a niche role in the NRL, similar to Jazz Tavanga, which is cool to see. Trent Merrin, local junior. Daniel Alvaro, no. Kate Ellis, is he a Dragons?
No, I don't think so.
So, you've got a couple high-quality local juniors, and when I watch the Tigers and know what's happening in their lower leagues, because I follow the movements of Kiwi players in reserve grade or under 21s or under 16s, at the junior level, the Tigers have... They just, whatever format it's laid out with, like ins and outs for this season's squad or just like team selections, like the Tigers junior teams consist a lot of players from other clubs, and those are junior teams. So these are under 18 teams, and they've had like half of their squad come from a different club, let alone under 20s and reserve grade. So that's what's happening in the junior ranks. They're just signing, they sign up Kiwi players. I've noted this season in reserve grade, they've just signed Kiwi players from other clubs. That's basically all they've done. And their whole reserve grade team is just players from other clubs. Their NRL team, Dane Laurie, not a Dragons junior. Nofaluma, he's Dragons hardcore. He's holding it down. James Roberts, not a Tigers junior. Kepa Oa, he was recruited by the Roosters from New Zealand to the Roosters. Tommy Talau came up through the Bulldogs. Adam Dewey came up through the Rabbitohs. Brooks, Tigers junior. Shout out to him. James Taumo came up through the Cowboys. Not sure about Simkin. Stefano Utukamanu came up through the Eels. Ofahengawi Broncos. Leilua Dragons. Alex Twal was with the Eels before the Tigers. Moses Impai came up through the Bulldogs. Luke Garner, local junior. Mikaeli was one of the last Kebra Park Tigers. And Zane Musgrove from the Rabbitohs. There's maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4 in 17 from the West Tigers, which is similar to the Dragons, but the Dragons are getting quality from their local juniors. Their local juniors are dufty. Jack Birds are hard. He was with the Dragons at the start. Zach Lomax, one of the best centers. The Dragons local juniors are really good. My initial point was that the Tigers don't have many, but then I realized they have the same amount as the Dragons. But then you also think Luke Brooks just kind of sucks. Doesn't impact the game at all. And some of these clubs have a lot of local players, but if you're... What's an easy way to wrap it up here? A lot of these NRL clubs, their NRL team has no connection to the local farm system. So for the Melbourne Storm, that's a bit tougher to do, but they do have some Victorian players coming through, so they're, let alone how well they recruit from everywhere else. But especially these Sydney teams and Queensland teams, you got to have some connection to your local farm, at least from a cultural standpoint, managing your salary cap, because those emerging players are going to be cheaper, just your vibe, we're the West Tigers, except, because I realized this when there was the Tommy Rodonica stuff, yeah, they're all representing the Tigers, and you should have that certain mana already, but none of those dudes came up through the Tigers. They don't have that affinity to Tommy Rodonicus. It was a bit of a strange situation, but to me, that's just it's a weird vibe, because it's Michael Maguire running that show, and he's promoting a lot of Kiwi players, as I said, but I don't think it's for a region in Sydney, an area like Sydney, central western Balmain area that's rugby league heartland, and they don't have any good juniors. So it's weird.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it's pretty shocking, really. Like, that's there's some clubs don't need that sort of aspect to it. The Tigers feel like one of those teams who certainly should have it, like that sort of, yeah, that connection to where you come from, the sort of, it's the heart of the club in a way. Like, it's something that the Dragons have, at least. Like, they've had times where in recent years where maybe, you know, a few of the guys coming through haven't been up to scratch, but they've also had a few who certainly are. So, and a few more that have gotten away from them. They didn't quite make it at the, you know, at the Dragons, went elsewhere and did their thing there. Jack Bird is one who went and came back. Like, it's a nice thing to have. It sort of reminds me of something. I might actually write about this in the email tomorrow, come to think of it. Just something because I was watching the Champions League this morning, Dortmund and Man City, and people go on and on about how Dortmund are this, like, European relative powerhouse at this point, like, who play like teenage players, and they've got a 17-year-old starting and an 18-year-old coming off the bench, couple 19, like all these young, really exciting, like, top tier prospects. And like, there seems to just be a bit of a narrative. Like, I've even seen this referred to when you look at how what New Zealand football's trying to do and getting under 20 players, like, shoehorned into teams now in the top flight. Like, it's nice if you have the players, and it's not, but you don't just get them by saying we're gonna play them. Like, you actually have to develop players through pathways, through structures, through good coaching systems, going way back to when they're like, 11, 12, 13. You couldn't really wait any longer than that. Like, if you want to have those players, you gotta have the structures going all the way down to the ground. But with Dortmund, I think I don't know, I just think it's a weird way that Dortmund are referred to as this, like, development club when they're maybe not. Like, I don't have the team list in front of me, but, like, Jude Bellingham is English, Jadon Sancho is English, Gio Reyna's American. You got, like, a Frenchman, a Spaniard playing in defense. We've got Erling Haaland, obviously the biggest one of all, is Norwegian. Like, these aren't players that club developed. This is just a club who is really smart and got some obviously insane, like, next level scouts working for them, who sign players and play them, but they're not players they develop themselves. I think there's like a weird sort of I think that's a point of the Dortmund thing that's worth, like, highlighting, is that they're just getting on the scout buzz a few years earlier than everyone else, while players are cheaper, and they've found this, like, loophole in the system. Sign guys when they're quite young, give them opportunities, let them flourish, and then sell them for insane amounts of money, which we're going to see for Erling Haaland if he goes to, like, Real Madrid or Barcelona or Man City or whoever in a couple months. Like, that's not Borussia Dortmund having a great youth system, though. They're not German guys from around the corner. There are a few of those types in this squad, but they tend to be the older veterans who stick around forever, and the guys who come and go are the young ones who they bring up, give them some minutes, sell them on for billions of dollars. Like, that, it's a different thing to what they seem to get credit for. It's not. There just seems to be a little bit of dissonance there, but I don't know. Well, the Tigers shouldn't be a team who has to, like, scout from other regions. They should at least have, like, you do that as well, but that shouldn't be the only thing you're doing. You got to have some, like, in an area where you should have good players coming through. You should have good players coming through, and also, are they getting the best players from other clubs, or are they getting guys who maybe weren't first choice at other clubs and therefore coming to the Tigers? Like, that's the other aspect to think about, not just with the Tigers, but with any team that's doing those kind of things, because the Storm are a bit like Borussia Dortmund in how they can recruit. They recruit guys below NRL level, and they get the best guys, and then they have the best players when they come through a couple years later down the line. Like, that's how you do it. That's not necessarily the way it's done at many other clubs. Not to pick on the Tigers, because others are just as bad, but yeah, because you highlighted them already, that's probably the case study.
Yeah, basically the West Tigers doing a mediocre job at it right now. Borussia Dortmund doing a very good job at it right now. And it's just what we do here.
Dortmund do a good job of it. It gets represented in a different way to the job they're actually doing, which makes them look even better. But hey, so it goes. I mean, this way makes more money, so fair enough.
That's what we do here. Cross-pollinate across sports, different countries, different sports, same trends, same insights. So, kia kaha, stay beautiful, and cheer.